Hey everyone, welcome to this MatchPal webinar on acing the away rotation. This webinar covers expectations for sub-interns and how you should be preparing, key tips and mistakes to avoid, and how to leverage letters of recommendation and networking to optimize your residency match outcome. We hope you enjoy.
So welcome everyone to our away rotation webinar. I'm Dan, one of the co-founders of MatchPal, and if you haven't met us before, kind of our goal here is to share with you guys the things that we accumulated along the way from our own experience as residents now and in working with all the students that we work with through our platform. So today we're going to cover a ton of material and everything you need to know before, during, and after away rotations and sub-internships. So we're going to jump right into our meeting agenda. We're going to talk about preparing for aways. We're going to obviously have a multi-specialty panel here across a variety of specialties chiming in on what they did to prepare and succeed on away rotations. We're going to talk about standing out. A lot of people ask questions in the sign-up form about what it takes to stand out, how to communicate with faculty. We're going to touch upon that. We'll talk about networking, getting letters of recommendation, which is obviously super important. And then we're going to also talk about, our specialty-specific strategies in our breakout rooms. So you guys got to stay tuned to the end so that you guys can ask some specialty-specific questions. And I think everyone's here for the reason that they know. I mean, everyone knows that away rotations are super, super important. And they're just one part of the process, though. And I want everyone to kind of remind everyone that everything that we're going to stress today is vital for success. But all the other parts of your application, your scores, your personal statement, your interview performance, these things are still just as important, right? So I don't want anyone to walk away from here thinking that the away rotation is the only thing that you got to do. Really, it's the whole package that program directors are looking for. And we'll talk about that at the end. So I want to introduce our panel. We got together some of the best and brightest in the game from our team, and we tried to get representation across all the different types of specialties. So I'll be here. I'm Dan. I'm an interventional radiology resident. I'm PGY4 from New York City, and I'll be representing, radiology, IR, so a little bit of kind of the road specialty, a little bit of the procedural or surgical subspecialty, and then we'll just go round robin. So maybe we'll start with Vinit. Maybe tell us, a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Vinit. I'm an internal medicine PGY3 resident finishing up in the next month. So I'm super excited applying a fellowship this summer in cardiology. I'm from the Jersey area, but I'm a resident over at Pennsylvania Hospital, which is one of the University of Pennsylvania Health System hospitals in Philadelphia. Super excited to be here. Can't wait to talk to you guys a little bit more.
All right. And we have very special guest Asia joining us from the ortho call room, which is dedication if I've ever seen it. I think Asia can't unmute. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Asia. I'm a first-year intern at Broward General Orthopedics. So I'm super excited to share with you guys all the information on ortho. I love my specialty. I'm super blessed, so super excited to talk to you guys. I'm from Northern California too, by the way. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Megan, I think Megan's here with us today.
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Megan. I'm a incoming PGY1 at University of Florida, Jacksonville, in emergency medicine.
Welcome, Megan. All right, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie. I'm a PGY2 at Valley Children's, and I'm originally from California and hope to stay in California when I go into fellowship in hospitalist medicine.
All right, Joe Goffman for Derm.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe. I'm finishing up my PGY 1 year with right now at the University of Miami. Super excited to be transitioning into my advanced specialty of dermatology. I'll be up in New York City with Dan next year. So save any of your skin questions for me. I'll be in the Q&A session at the end.
Love it. And last but not least, one of our newest advisors on the team, Mitch, for anesthesia. Let's get him. Here we go. Should be able to unmute now, Mitch.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
What's up, guys? My name's Mitchell. I'm also a PGY1 right now with Joe, University of Miami. Headed out to California, actually here soon, UCSF for anesthesia residency. So, trying to move across country is always a fun thing to be juggling. But yeah, nice to meet you.
Thanks for joining us amidst the transition, man. We appreciate you. All right, so I think everyone's heard this term, and I wanted to start here because everyone's heard the term of like the away rotation is a month-long interview. 50% of students, this is a stat that always fascinated me. 50% of students that complete an away rotation match on one of the programs they rotated at. And I think it's the first question I want to go for the panel, which is yes or no, guys. You can unmute one by one. I'll start. Did you match at a place that you did an away rotation at? And for me, I did 3 away rotations and I did match at one of them. So I don't know. Mitch is the first person I see.
I actually was fortunate enough to match. I didn't do an away rotation there, but yeah, I had a lot of coming from an MD school. I had a lot of home rotations at University of Miami, but yeah, I didn't match at my away.
But you did do a sub by over at your home program.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, great. What about you, Megan?
Yeah, I did 3 away rotations all in Florida. The goal was to stay in Florida, and I matched at one of them.
All right, Natalie?
Likewise, I did, I think, 4 away rotations, and I ended up matching at one of them.
Okay. I know Joe definitely matched at one of his away rotation sites, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, not only did I match at the site I rotated at, I didn't get any interviews at any programs. I didn't do an away rotation or audition at, so can't recommend that enough.
Sure. And then I got Bennett and Asia.
I did 4, if I remember correctly, and I did match at one of them.
Yeah, I did 6 rotations, interviews for 7, and then matched out my top one, which I rotated at.
It's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's just, we're obviously we're a small pool, but I feel like that goes to show how important the rotations are and how impactful it can be when you already have a really good application and you already, you have the package on paper, but then you can show up for a month and really put that to the test in front of people, right? It makes you all the more desirable, memorable. And I think the bottom boxes I put there because I wanted everyone to think about the fact that you're not just there to impress people, you're also there to evaluate the program. And I think as a med student, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce of like everyone's like looking at me, like you're constantly the subject of evaluation. But I want you guys to remember that, especially because most people do go on multiple away rotations, you are going to have these kind of metrics to compare program cultures, procedure types, volumes, case mix, location. All these things are things that I want everyone to be very acutely aware of and keeping track of. Like literally have a spreadsheet or handwritten, whatever you want to do, track the vibe of the program, track the differences, because at the end of the cycle, you're tired and it all blends in together. And then you go through the interview season and you're kind of like lost, right? You're like, I don't even remember what I did where. So I think documenting the journey for yourself is going to make your decision making at come rank list a lot easier. All right. So what do programs actually care about? I think this is probably like the main thing that students ask is like, all right, I got the OAs, I applied through VSLO. What are they actually looking for? And I think each of these things are their own major kind of criteria that a program director and the faculty and even the residents, when we work with students, this is the stuff that we're looking for, right? So I think starting off, we want to see students that are not putting any patient at risk, right? I know that sounds kind of, like it shouldn't, it's obvious, but you want someone who is not going to be so gung-ho about trying to impress people that they're going to go and do something silly or dangerous. And also like understanding where your role is in the team. And I think this goes even more for some of the surgical specialties, I would say, than the medical ones, because in surgical specialties, you can potentially try to be more hands-on and get involved and maybe overstep your boundary. The other thing is improvement over time. There's no expectation that you walk in on day one perfect, okay? No, this is like you're a 4th-year med student, you're not an attending, you're not even a resident. Your goal is to impress, but your goal is also there to learn. And for a lot of you, like myself included, you're showing up on day 1 of that rotation and you may have never even done that specialty before, right? And maybe Asia, Joe, some of these subspecialties that you're not doing a core clerkship in, you never had a chance to rotate on that service before. So the goal is to show the improvement over time so that day 1 and day 30 is 2 different versions of you, right? 2 different versions that are ideally leaps and bounds. You're way better at the end of the rotation as far as your knowledge and your ability to kind of add value to the team and awareness of the specialty and the procedures, diagnosis, et cetera. I think obviously trustworthy and honest, it kind of also goes without saying, right? You want to be able to be someone that they depend on and are going to, not lie about tasks that you didn't complete and be just like overall like someone that if we assign you a task, as no matter how big or small it is, we know that you're going to be able to get it done. And that's something that does take time, right? It's earned over the course of the month, let's say, but it's still super important. And the other things are kind of a little bit, they kind of tie in with everything else, right? You want to have the knowledge and the interest. Hopefully you're not at rotation for, for no reason, right? You're there because you're really excited to learn more about the specialty. You're again not overstepping, and then you're also professional with every team member. And I've literally seen and heard of students get burned because they were super good with the doctors, the residents, and the attendings, but then they weren't professional with ancillary staff, whether that be nurses, techs, or program coordinators. So make sure that you keep that in mind as well. Now I want to ask maybe Asia and Joe for the specialties that are maybe like not MS3 clerkships, right? And Mitch as well. Feel free to chime in. How do you go about, kind of like how did that feel coming into a specialty where you didn't have any exposure during MS3, like really like a foundation to back on?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. So I know Asia and I actually went to medical school together, so she can tell you herself. We had, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks of integumentary systems in med school. So you're coming in on your first day really cold. Hopefully you've had some opportunities to get exposure and shadow ahead of time. But even if you come in on your first ever away rotation, it's your first day ever in derm, they're not expecting you to know a lot. But when you have genuine interest, it shows. It also shows if you really don't give a shit. You're on your phone between patient encounters, asking questions, showing you're physically present in the moment is super duper valuable. And I think bullet point number 2 is super important. Being coachable, showing that you're learning, that you're taking notes, you're studying up on what you saw in clinic, and making sure that that version of you on the last day of your rotation is a really one who's grown a lot from the first day there is one of the most important things.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Joe said. He explained it very nicely. Something else that you can do if you don't have that exposure. Luckily, I was able to get into an OR with a family friend earlier, but that's fine. If you don't have that opportunity, things that you can really focus on when you're in the like in the ORs and stuff is how you can integrate into the team, because that's what we're really looking for. Can you work with the nursing staff, with the scrub techs? Can you just literally become part of the team, and how fast that can happen? If you could just focus on that, and obviously, yeah, don't think that I need to know every single thing. No one knows every single thing. Just show improvement over time. Show that you're learning. That's really important.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I completely agree with what Joe and Edra was saying. Definitely anesthesia. You might get 2 weeks if you're lucky during your first, preclinical clinical time. So they're not really expecting much. You're not going to go in there, nail every intubation, hit an A line, hit a central line. That's not going to happen. They just care that, you're there, you're learning, and you show a genuine interest. And there's ways that you can show interest. Like the night before, read up on the patient, come up and would develop an anesthetic plan, something like that, and take that initiative, present to the resident, maybe even the attending, going that extra mile and showing that you really care and putting an effort and trying to improve is really important. Again, you're not going to be expected to nail every procedure. I mean, I'm going into it, starting my anesthesia rotation here in a month at UCSF, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a bunch of stuff too. So as a sub-I, they're not expecting that at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that kind of goes in with preparing, right? So I think some of the ways that you can actually mitigate how maybe lost you feel on day one is preparing before you go. I think part of that prep goes to the programs itself, not even necessarily the specialty, right? Because you're going to do this prep for every rotation, right? So there's the general knowledge that you need to know, and every specialty has their own distinct, books, resources. I know we have some sub-I boot camps that we put together because there weren't that many resources for some of the specialties. So definitely could check those out. But there's also, there's books, there's flashcards, there's all these different resources that you can use to get the knowledge, because the knowledge is going to be different than what's expected for you for MS3 or step 2. But then there's also the idea of like, what does the program want, right? So usually the program coordinator hopefully has sent you some information about where to be on day one, where's the hospital, where are you living if you're moving to a true away rotation out of state. Get all that sorted. Make sure that like none of that is like you're not doing that like the morning of, right? The other thing I always tell students that kind of goes over everyone's head because nobody tells them to do this is meet with someone on day one, whether it's the PD or the preceptor. Like a lot of rotations don't have that meeting built in. They just tell you show up at 7 a.m. We're running the list or we're doing rounds, and you're just like, all right, I guess I'm running the list and doing rounds. But like find time, find 20 minutes, knock on a door, send an email the night before, whatever it is, to make that meeting happen so that you can understand from their perspective what they want you to do, what it means to be excellent, what it means to be, like above and beyond, so that you can reverse engineer that and actually implement it over the course of the month. I think that is super, super important that a lot of students don't do. And I think pro tip, set an exit interview as well. Because a lot of the time you want to set a meeting at the end and you want to say, all right, like I hope I did well. Is there any feedback that you can give me? Because I want to do this specialty. I hope I was able to grow over the course of this month. And that's also might be the time where you ask for your letter of rec as well, right? Hope assuming that meeting goes well. So I think having this framework in place makes this all a lot more manageable, right? So resources, understanding the program, understanding where you need to be, and then setting that interface with key faculty members in order to actually establish what's expected of you, because there's, every program is a little different. Some places are going to be a lot of autonomy. Some places are not going to be a lot. Some places are going to be very hands off. And you're going to, again, see that in your experience as you go through this whole thing. I think there's some general rules that we want you to know, right? Because these are all the things that I think I would want my, when I try to, emulate. And I think when I see a visiting student in my program come and kind of achieve all of these things, usually it's very hard for me not to be impressed, right? And I think owning the patients is the first thing, right? I think in MS3, it's very easy to just get away with just being a very passive learner. You're just there on rounds. Maybe you get, you answer a question here and there. Maybe help write a note if if you're lucky, right? But it's really a very passive role, and you're worried about your shelf, you're worried about step two, you have all these things happening, and you're not really able to like immerse, right? There's a lot of MS3s that don't even have EMR access, right? I actually didn't have EMR access when I was in MS3, which is like kind of crazy to think about in hindsight. So now that you're at MS4, you're at a new institution, like get EMR access, treat the patients that you're assigned to like your own, right? Like I think Mitch or Vinit, someone mentioned about like reading up the night before, right? Like that's huge. Like actually do that. Why are we doing this procedure? What are we working this patient up for? Who are, what medications are they on? Whatever it is for your specific specialty, like come in the morning ready, doing that. Like it's already like locked in, right? And understand what happens to the patient throughout the day. So if there's any imaging ordered, following up on that. If there's any procedures that were supposed to happen, if you're not on a surgical rotation, but like you're sending them to a different service, you should be the one to know about that, calling teams, coordinating all that care, and honestly reporting that to your residents, right? I think that's like the most, in my opinion, if a student tells me about a lab that resulted or an imaging study that we ordered in the morning and now it's in the afternoon, they're like, hey, by the way, I just checked, the CT's ready. We should take a look at it so we can like see what we're doing with this patient. That's it. I'm impressed. It's like, it's over. Right. And I want to kind of go into like avoid pretending to know what you don't know. Right. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know. We kind of beat this around already, but like, you're not going to know everything. It's more about like asking thoughtful questions and just being an engaged learner. I know showing up early, stay late. I think obviously like that goes without saying. I think we hear that a lot in med school, but I think we really mean it. Any sub-I who's like eager to like leave early, or just kind of like shows up like not at the same time as like the residents do to like chart check or pre-round or prep for the day. I think it's just not a good look, right? I mean, even if you have all the other stuff that like, even if you somehow have all the other things lined up, it's not a good look when you're not able to kind of demonstrate that. And then the last part, I mean, learning the workflow of the team is hard. I mean, I don't know, maybe Vinay, if you want to chime in on that, if there's a student coming in to a new environment, what are some of the things that they should be paying attention to? Let's say you're on a medicine rotation, right? I know a lot of people are going to be doing some sort of like medicine. I think FM falls into this, maybe even EM a little bit. Like, what are they looking for when they're trying to establish like their role in the team and the workflows?
I think if I think it's very okay when you first join a team to ask them directly what their expectations of you are. Part of the reason for that is because if you don't have that outlined somewhere, it may be outlined on a piece of paper, but it may not be outlined for the team, and the team may be a little bit more unique. I usually would recommend asking the senior resident, attending, etc., what maybe their expectations of you are, as well as what you're expecting out of the rotation as well. So, for example, if you're going in thinking that, hey, I want to get a letter of recommendation out of this, or hey, I want to get some more exposure being like the independent provider for this patient with some supervision, etc. I would say that from the very beginning, so that kind of sets the stage for the rest of your rotation. The first couple days of any rotation are always a little bit difficult. I remember that as a student because you're often in a new place, new people, and you're kind of learning the system. And so as things go along, it's important to be a sponge, but also it's fine to ask questions about, what the routine is, and so you know what to expect as you're going in to kind of succeed. So that, as Dan mentioned, may include coming in a little bit earlier in the day so that you can be prepared for that reason. Because curveballs will happen, you might get slowed down a little bit, as well as maybe preparing to stay a little bit later, just maybe even for the beginning, so that things can run smoothly for you. The more time you put in at the very beginning, the smoother the rest of the rotation, I think, will go for you as well.
Yeah, I totally
And
agree.
if I just touch on that just a little bit, I mean, I can speak for myself. Going through these away rotations, you're so nervous. You're trying to chase your dream. Uh, but when you're in a faraway city, maybe somewhere you've never been with a team you've never worked with, and like for myself in Durham, when I was on these 2 week aways, I would be spending every day with a different attending. And when your goal is exceeding expectations, I think it's really important to start the day understanding what those expectations are. When you're working with a different attending every single day, figure out what it is that they want from you, because the attending you're with on Monday might want you gloves on, super involved. The attending on Tuesday might want you to be a fly in the wall, not interrupt, not speak during patient encounters. So the expectations of you are going to be very, very different day to day on these aways. So figuring out what those are will let you exceed and shine in the way that you hope to.
Absolutely. And then, Natalie, I wanted to know if there's any specific considerations for those interested in peds. I know peds obviously deals with both, the patients and then also family members. So is there anything specific for visiting students who are maybe taking ownership in the sense of like talking to, patients' families that you would maybe give them?
Yeah, for sure. I always tell all of my medical students that like the two things that you can completely control is attitude and arrival. So how like your attitude that you bring to your rotation and how you treat everyone, and then your arriving on time is in your control. As far as interacting like with patients and families, a lot of pediatric hospitals, they utilize like family-centered rounds. So as opposed to doing like table rounds or rounds with your team where you're just talking with your colleagues, you are actually presenting to the families. And so it's a really big difference. And you have to switch. We've spent the last like 3, 4 years learning all the medical jargon, and now you need to flip it back to be able to communicate with families. And the sooner you're able to like pick up on that and kind of learn that language again, is really helpful. Also not being afraid to like get on your hands and knees in pediatrics, I think is really important. And then just knowing that you're dealing with like really sometimes small, very critically ill patients. So especially in the NICU and the PICU, always check with your bedside nurse. Like, is this a patient we want to consolidate cares for? Is this a patient that, needs to have, did they just get cardiothoracic surgery? Are they not being lifted like underneath their arms? Like these are things that we may not think of. Like we're not picking up adults, but for little ones, like we often do pick up. So making sure to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. I think it's just really important to like, it's just a different experience for the peds. And I think that, we do a peds IR service, so we see that all the time. Yeah. And then I think the last thing, never act maliciously or make other students look bad. Right? A lot of the time, you're not going to be alone on these rotations. You're going to have other people, and they technically are your competition, but they're not your competition in a way that you have to act, and you never should act unprofessionally or do anything, you know, neck and neck to compete with them. You have to shine on your own. And if anything, I think helping people learn and helping people grow alongside you is far more admirable than trying to do something sleazy and make them look bad on purpose. Because that kind of stuff, even if you try to be low key, you're probably not going to be low key. We're going to see it as residents, especially. and that's going to come out in the, kind of post rotation brief when we kind of evaluate all of our students. All right, so I have this do's and don'ts stud. I think a lot of this stuff is more for you guys to take a look at. I'd love to ask the panel if there's one thing that a student recently did that was either a major like red flag or green flag, something that stood out to you as like exceptional in either direction. What would it be? And I think I could start us off while you guys take a moment to think about it. But for me, big red flag. I think I kind of hinted at this earlier. Was there's like one student who kind of like dismissed themselves. And I know it sounds kind of crazy that somebody would want to do that, but they did. And it really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think the guy was like overall not bad. He wasn't like particularly excellent, but the fact that he did that really rubbed me the wrong way. I really didn't like that. And I feel like I'm not trying to look for ways to make students get, worse evaluations or worse, like, how they like kind of impress upon me. But something about the way that was done was like weird. And I feel like if you have to leave for like a family event, an emergency, it's totally understandable. You can mention that, but don't be like, oh yeah, looks like we're done for the day. Is it okay if I head out? You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. Right. But yeah, I don't know if you guys want to chime in on like red flags or green flags that students have done over the years.
I think I've had a lot of students now over the last couple of years, and there's probably a lot more that I can think of. But one thing that I always really admired about students was when they would go and reassess patients or speak to their families and patients without me asking. And I usually don't really actually expect that of a medical student to go and do that. But for my sub-Is who uh, I think sometimes, especially in internal medicine, like you go, you pre-round, then you round on the patient, and then you kind of think you're done for the day, and you kind of wait until the next day and wait for like maybe like a new admission to come in. But the ones that I really personally had a soft spot for were the ones that would go back and check in on the patient later in the afternoon, or especially if they had a procedure that day, just checked in to see how they were doing, or provided a family update without me asking them to, or things like that. I think bedside manner is one of the most important skills that you'll graduate medical school from that you can actually really have a good control over. And so that would be probably one of the biggest green flags because that's probably akin to somebody that's a good team player, you know what I mean, or a good person to work with in general.
Anyone else have a red flag or green flag from over the years?
A big green flag for me is I just want to see that the students I'm working with like genuinely care, even if they're not necessarily interviewing for a spot in a derm residency. After a patient encounter, asking questions, having discussions with me, kind of asking me how I arrived at a certain line of thinking, just kind of engaging me and trying to understand how we got to where we are. Just seeing that someone cares and is really curious and passionately interested is like the biggest green flag to me.
Totally agree.
Oh, I was gonna say both like a green flag and a red flag is being aware of your surroundings. And I know that that like goes without saying, but like recognizing like those unspoken communication where like the senior resident is often super stressed. They're in charge of the team, they're in charge of the new interns, they're in charge of you, they're in charge of the patient. So recognizing like when your time is to kind of step in and like finding, I often say like the intern that will be like your buddy and like your point person where you can ask them for feedback. And then as you're able to like learn more about the dynamics of the team, you're able to like figure out like, okay, when's a good time to ask these questions?
Absolutely. All right, cool. So I think these are kind of the biggest fear, especially for the more pimp heavy specialties, is, getting asked a question you might not know the answer to, or feeling like you're, feeling the pressure. Even if you know the answer, you can just like freeze and like blank or just say the wrong thing. I think it's just, I like to think of pimping. It's kind of like partly practical in assessing like how good your knowledge base is, partly a rite of passage. I think obviously different programs and different specialties do pimping differently. Asia probably got pimped more than I did, and maybe other people did. I think ortho's like notoriously pimp heavy, and other specialties are like way more lax, or like maybe like it's just more chill in how they do it. But I think there's a way to handle it, right? Part of it is preparing, like we mentioned earlier, and making sure that you're actually having the knowledge at least at your level, right? That's expected for an MS4. And the other side is like handling the scenarios with grace if you don't, right? So understanding that like looking things up and coming back the next day with an explanation and like following up on it is huge, right? Because if I ask you a question, you don't know the answer. And then that's okay. You say, hey, oh, actually, I don't, I never heard about, a TIPS procedure. I don't know what that, that's so like, that sounds really cool. I actually don't know the steps or like the devices that we used to do it. And then the next day, I mean, I'll forget about it. I'm like, ah, it's fine. You didn't know it. And then the next day you're like, hey, I was reading all about TIPS and like, do you guys use this device or that device, or you use this approach or that approach? And I would like you like re-triggered that conversation with me, and it cemented that you took effort that I didn't tell you to do. It shows enthusiasm, it shows ownership, it shows all these admirable traits. And I think that that's a way to overcome not knowing everything, and it's also exactly how you learn and have, like just become a very different version of yourself by the end of that rotation because you do this every single day when inevitably somebody asks you a question that you don't know about. I don't know, Adrian, do you have any specific tips on uh, navigating getting pimped in, either in the R or during like rounds?
Yes, definitely. I went through that a lot of pimping. I hated it. I would just get so sweaty and then like blank. But the biggest tip is they do not expect you to know what they're pimping you for the most part, right? There's your basic ortho knowledge that you're going to read up on, and I'll give you guys some resources if you don't have it when we do our breakout rooms. But when they pimp you, they're looking for progression. They have it strategically placed that they'll have one attending ask you one day, and then in a couple of days, they'll have the same attending ask you, a different attending ask you the same question, then they'll look for progression. So they're very skilled in the way they even pimp you. So just handle it with grace, like you said, and do not go get hard on yourself. Like just take a deep breath. You're like, okay, I'm going to look that up, and then just study it, and then just know it for next time, and just know that this is growth. We have to have growth mindsets to progress in this field.
Absolutely. Megan, what about you? Maybe did you get a lot of pimping in like high acuity situations, or was it all like in more like lax settings?
Yeah, I think EM is a lot about just like having humility. So I think sometimes they pimp just for fun, but a lot of the time they're really just looking for if they ask you a really hard question for you to be willing to say, I have no idea, and I'll go look it up and I'll tell you about it tomorrow. But I think having like a basic idea of how some procedures work or some basic ultrasound ideas are always a good idea to have. But aside from that, the pimping isn't too bad. They're really just going off like how you respond to like the difficult questions and making sure you're humble and honest with like what you know and your level of training.
Mitch, were you going to say something?
Yeah, anesthesia wasn't that intense as ortho. In anesthesia, you're with the resident most of the time. So in my experience, it was mostly just, talking with them and like learning stuff with them. Occasionally the attending would come in and ask you a question here and there. But overall, definitely I'll share some resources with everyone in the breakout room as well on, reading up on the basics, the theory behind the different procedures and everything. And yeah.
All right, cool. And then I think letters of rec is another major kind of question mark for a lot of students. So I think, who choosing a letter writer, and then we might have a lot of, like variety as far as what people think on the panel. So I'm actually very curious to know what you guys think. The advice that I always kind of thought about and give to a lot of the students that I work with through MatchPal is, you know, someone who knows you better is always a better letter writer than just like a very high up person. And I know this can vary from some specialties, and I know this can vary from some programs even, but the idea that I always kind of went off of is if someone worked with you for 2 to 3 weeks, the letter that they're going to be able to give you is going to be just so much more genuine and in depth and representative of who you are versus like a generic letter from someone who maybe collected a little bit of positive word on the street from other faculty, but maybe like didn't actually know you personally. So the worst thing, I mean, I feel like I've talked to PDs about this, and like the worst thing is like opening a letter that's like a three-liner. You know what I mean? That like doesn't have any substance. They kind of can tell that, they're kind of just writing this as like as like a just like a nice thing to do for you because they don't want to say no. You spent the month rotating there, they don't want to say no to you. And it's not a bad letter, but it's just not a great letter, right? So I feel like that's the advice that I always had for students. I'm wondering if anyone here feels the same or differently based on your specialty or your experience.
Yeah, so I mean, I speak only for internal medicine because I think that it may be a little bit different depending on the other subspecialties and stuff. But for internal medicine, I think um, the person that knows you the best should be the one that writes you a letter. I think we care about the quality of the letter and not necessarily the position of who that person was or where they came from and things like that. Um, of course, if you go to an away rotation or a program that you rotate with somebody, maybe you only worked with them for like a week, for example, and not long enough that maybe they got to know you on a deep level for them to write a letter of recommendation. I'd like to add that I think it's also okay to kind of just ask them to put in a good word for you with the program director and things like that. Actually, a program director suggested that to me when I did a rotation, an away rotation at a hospital, saying, "Hey, yeah, you should ask your preceptor who you spent the most time with to kind of like say a couple nice things about you to me in an email, just so that you can kind of quote unquote get credit for your time being here." You know what I mean? And that's on top of like the letters that you get. But I agree overall, I think that the quality of your letters is probably the best in internal medicine, at least. And the best letters speak to not only your actual capabilities as a student and future resident, but also your character overall.
Absolutely. Anyone feel differently?
Emergency. Oh, so emergency medicine is different compared to a lot of the other specialties. It's you get something called a SLO, and they're required for you to apply for an emergency medicine residency. And most of the programs are transitioning now to something called group SLOs. So program directors, APDs, core faculty all have say in what goes on your letter. And you need two of them to apply to residency. So it works a little bit differently. When you go on an emergency medicine sub-I, it's expected that they'll be writing you a letter. So asking for one, you can double check and let them know that you need a SLO, but it's expected since you need two of them to apply. So the best thing I have to say there is check in with the APDs, with the core faculty, ask them if there's anything you can improve on throughout the weeks. Ask them on week 1, ask them on week 3, because in the SLO at the bottom of it, you get ranked. So bottom 1/3, middle 1/3, top 1/3, or top 10%. And all of the away rotations I had and all of the EM advisors I've worked with for myself in the past have said that your SLO is like the #1 rated thing on your EM application. So they look at that ranking on the bottom and they look at what other programs have to say about you. So it's really important that you just interact with all the faculty, all the nurses well for that. So it's just a little bit different to some other subspecialty letters.
Yeah, and I think OBGYN also does the SLO as well. But yeah, for anyone kind of applying to a specialty that needs that, definitely make sure you like look up the requirements and make sure you're like aware of that.
Yeah, and I know PM&R also started requiring SLOs this past year. I think they were highly recommended last year and strongly encouraged this year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the letter writers, just make sure you give them all your stuff, right? Like a CV, up to date personal statement, even if it's just a draft. Like make it easy for them. Like give them a timeline, send them the link from ERAS right away. Like make it easy for them to just submit and to like do like all the work on your end, so that all they have to do is like come up with a letter and send it in.
Yeah.
I think out of the interest of time, we're going to keep it going and we can ask some more questions in the breakout room. A lot of the questions that we got in the sign up form was about networking. So I think, networking comes down to like all these connections that you make through the natural clinical interactions that you're going to have in the rotation. And then there's like, what do you do afterwards? So I think some of the things that I always tell students to keep in mind: send a thank you email to anyone that you worked with, right? It doesn't have to be everyone, but like the people that you spent a lot of time with. I think it's always nice to send an email saying, hey, this has been a great experience. Here's what I loved. Hope to be in touch with you guys soon, right? This goes for faculty and residents. I think it's actually a really nice touch. I think that if there's research that you were involved with, I think it's always great. Sub-I is a great opportunity to get involved with research, whether it's case reports or something more. So research also functions as this natural way to maintain contact with the resident and attending that you're publishing with. Okay? So that's one thing that I actually did myself that worked really, really well in terms of like staying kind of at the tip of the tongue for the program, right? They're like, oh, like Dan, like not only rotated here, but he also actually like he's still publishing with us, etc. So I think that helps a lot. I think that if you have a good relationship, having updates on any milestones, right? So whether that is a personal milestone that you were looking forward to that you shared naturally just by, when you were engaging in just like regular conversation and you just kind of like were on that level of a relationship with the resident or attending, that's okay. That's not going to happen for everyone, right? But I'm just saying if it does, that's another kind of creative way. And then I think cool cases or procedures. And again, this is not a relationship that not everyone's necessarily going to have. But if you did develop that kind of a bond or relationship about a specific procedure or a specific subject matter with an attending or resident, I think sharing articles, things that come up in like your specialty is an interesting way to try to maintain contact. Again, you want to walk the line here, right? Don't do this in any egregious fashion. Don't it's not overkill. Don't be awkward. Don't do it excessively. But these are just ideas for you guys to think about as you go through your rotations and think about ways to keep in mind, because you don't want to be forgotten after you've left, right? And I think not everyone is, but these are just some strategies that I've seen work. And of course, if you're going to be ranking a program number one, it's a no-brainer, right? Definitely send the program coordinator and program director the email that, hey, love my time here. I'm going to be ranking you guys number one. Send it, in February, in January, February, and give them that heads up. All right, so I want to get you guys into the breakout room. So we want to couple of final points, right? This is kind of the checklist. If you guys want to take a picture, or I think we covered everything here. We talked about setting yourself up early, getting the resources that you need. We talked about how challenging it can be to kind of hit the ground running, but how much growth you're going to experience. We also talked about how making good impressions, the red flags, the green flags, LORs, staying in contact, and then we also touched upon this, that the away rotation is just one part of this whole experience, right? It is literally, it's this crucial month where you get to really showcase your talent, but it's still not everything, right? And personal statement, ERAS, interview prep, that's all extremely important. And that's actually all the type of stuff, in addition to prepping you guys for Subways, that our team does. So a lot of you guys may know who we are, but our platform basically functions to provide students with that exact type of mentorship and guidance. And our role is to kind of be a specialty specific advisor for you guys, for students who either don't have a home program or just need additional support in putting together the best possible application and preparing for exams as well. I know a lot of you guys might be in step 2 dedicated. So, we're a resource that exists, and we've been around. We've been helping tons of students for this is our 4th year now, and it's been awesome. It's been awesome working with so many amazing students, getting them into their top choice specialties and programs, and ensuring that they're putting their best foot forward in the process. And so, as we go into the breakout rooms, we want to give you guys an opportunity. If you are interested, we have a few spots left with our team for this cycle. So if you want to chat with us to learn more about working with us, you can just book a free call here. I think we'll also drop the link in the chat for anyone that's interested. We'll leave this up on the screen for just a second while we set up the breakout rooms and kind of do some last minute kind of general Q&A. And then I want you guys to have an opportunity to spend 10, 15 minutes with your specialty specific advisor, get into the nitty gritty of all those kind of nuanced questions that maybe don't pertain to everyone, but are very unique to the specific field. So I'm going to have you guys step into some breakout rooms in just a second. But I thank everyone for their time. Thank you all for joining the call today. And if you guys, like I said, if you guys want to chat with us, I think there's a free call link in our chat as well, if you guys want to work with a team. And otherwise, we're going to be hopefully doing some more webinars this summer, and hopefully you'll see a little bit more around of us, and have a good rest of your night, and email us with any questions. Okay. Thanks to the panelists again for your time.